Hey guys, welcome back to the Discipline Life Podcast, the place where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Aria, and on today's podcast, I am on my own because Coda is not feeling well and has decided to take time to rest and recuperate this week. So last week, we started revisiting old topics that we covered in the very beginning of the podcast. However, I wouldn't feel right about continuing that without Coda here because I really do think that he deserves the opportunity to give his thoughts and opinions on how his thoughts and opinions have changed. And so on today's podcast, I'm going to be shifting gears. I'm going to be doing a brand new topic, and then next week we will continue to revisit some of those old topics again. What I want to talk about today is the stress, overwhelm, and burnout that can happen, especially this time of year. At the time of recording, we are 2 weeks away from Christmas, and this time of year is just, it can be a lot. And so I wanted to talk about overwhelm and burnout from the submissive perspective, because even though I know that heads of household, they have their own versions of overwhelm and burnout and stress, I can't speak to that. That's not my experience. So I am going to be speaking from the submissive perspective on how those things happen and how they affect us and what we can do to avoid that. Overwhelm leads to burnout, and they are different, but one definitely leads into the other, right? And so if we can find a way to recognize when we're feeling overwhelmed, we can take steps to course correct to avoid burnout. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about like defining what overwhelm and burnout are, why they happen, steps to avoid burnout, and what you can do to get out of a cycle of burnout once you're there. So overwhelm is just that internal feeling of feeling like you cannot get it all done, right? Feeling like you have a to-do list a mile long and not enough hours in the day. And those feelings of overwhelm can lead to burnout, because if you go days and weeks and maybe even months sometimes feeling like you are not accomplishing enough, that you are not ever getting your to-do list done, you're never working through those tasks, and you feel like you're giving and giving and giving and giving of yourself without ever feeding back into yourself and taking that time for yourself, that leads to these overwhelming feelings, and that will lead to burnout. And burnout is really that feeling like you know that you have a mile-long to-do list, you know that things need to be done and you're the one that needs to do them, but you just cannot make yourself. And that's how I define overwhelm versus burnout. Overwhelm is that like anxious feeling of not being able to get it all done, and burnout is more of just a paralyzation of not being able to make yourself move forward, even though you desperately want to. So what leads to overwhelm? Overwhelm happens when we take on more than what we can accomplish. So everyone has a threshold of what they can and cannot do. None of us have an infinite amount of energy and resources and time. We all are working within our own limitations. And your limitations they'll definitely be different than someone else's. And so it really does not serve you to compare yourself to someone else in this area, because that comparison really doesn't serve you. You need to look at yourself and see where your own limits are, because when you take on too much, you simply cannot get it all done. And this time of year, especially around the holidays, it's very tempting. It's very tempting to take on more and to do those special events and to um, volunteer and just being out and about, right? And so if you are already working within a fixed schedule, just have systems and routines in place, and then you add into that, something has to give, or you're going to get overwhelmed. And sometimes it's okay to do that for a season. It's okay to, take those opportunities and participate in the special events because they only do come once a year. However, when you do that, you really need to be careful to reevaluate, and I'm going to get more into this later, but reevaluate your to-dos, right? So that you can make time so that you don't get overwhelmed. So now that we've kind of gone over why overwhelm happens, the way to avoid getting overwhelmed and burnt out is to scale back. If you are finding that you have way too many things going on in your life, you need to find areas that you can scale back. Maybe that means that you say no to a volunteer opportunity. Maybe that means that you get store-bought cookies instead of making them yourself. Maybe that means that you say no to the holiday party that you want to go to. Whatever it is, you set your priorities and you see, okay, what are the things that absolutely have to get done? What are the things I really want to do? And what are the things that can really be moved off the list? Because in order to avoid that burnout, you really do need to scale back, because there's no way that you can avoid scaling back without risking becoming overwhelmed. And so you really need to reset your expectations. I know that when I was growing up, I really looked at different things that really shaped my worldview of what it meant to be a wife and a mom. And so I remember watching the idealistic movies and seeing the Norman Rockwell-esque depictions of home life and, what it meant to be a homemaker and what it meant to be a mom and what the holidays were supposed to look like. That is completely unrealistic. That is a very idealistic perspective, and it's not one that necessarily exists in most people's lives. And so when you are looking at what you want the culture of your family and the culture around the holidays that you choose to celebrate to be, you really need to set realistic expectations about how much you can be involved in, how much you can participate in, and what your contributions can be, as well as set realistic expectations around your everyday tasks and fit all of that into the time, energy, and effort that you have to give. And so part of that is that sometimes in order to have the time, energy, and effort to put into making these holiday memories happen, or being able to participate in special events this time of year, means that you need to ask for help. And asking for help is not a sign of failure. It's not a personal failing. It's not something that is a weakness. I know that for myself, I absolutely hate asking for help because I feel like it says something about who I am. And I've realized that asking for help is not a bad thing. None of us can do this on our own, especially if you are in a position where you are trying to make the most of all the opportunities and all the events, and you really want to make this time, you know, as special and magical as you can for your kids or your family, and you want to take those travel opportunities and you want to, you know, make those special meals, you're going to have to ask for help. And that could be from friends, that can be from family, that can be from your head of household. You can just reach out and say, look, I really value the traditions that we hold, and I want to make those possible. But in order to make those possible, I need some help in this area. Now, if possible, if it works into your budget and family priorities, you can even hire help. And so, you know, that might look like ordering homemade cookies from a friend or neighbor, or, you know, someone local that can make those homemade goodies and you just can pass them off as your own. That might look like getting a cleaning lady. That might look like even going and buying pre-made meals, getting the occasional takeout, anything that can alleviate some of the pressure from what you are trying to do is worth it. It's worth it because you really do have to just figure out a way to take some of those tasks off of your plate by asking for help, and that help can come in the form of friends, family, even your children if they're old enough, get them involved. And if none of that's available, then look into what you can hire out. And so you've scaled back, you've reset your expectations, you've asked for help. The last thing that you can do to really avoid burnout is set aside time to rest and recuperate and fill yourself up. You know, treat your downtime, your time to rest, as a priority item in your schedule. I know for myself, when I have experienced the worst burnout, I had gotten to a point where I was, and this wasn't even a holiday time, this was just a typical time. I had gotten to the point where I was not taking care of myself at all. And I wasn't sleeping well because I always had this anxious feeling that, you know, I have to do more. I'm not getting enough done. And so I was having some anxiety that was affecting my sleep. And because it was affecting my sleep, I wasn't as productive during the day. And so I just kept falling further and further behind. And because I wasn't accomplishing what I thought I should be accomplishing during the day, I found that I was convincing myself that it was selfish to do even the most basic self-care for myself, because I was like, I can't even take a shower, for instance, until everything else on my to-do list is done. And that's just not okay. Like, that's not where we should allow our mindset to land. We should view taking care of ourselves and allowing ourselves time to rest and enjoy the season, enjoy our homes, enjoy our marriages, enjoy our relationships, enjoy our children, enjoy all of the things that life has to offer us. We need to give ourselves time to do that, because if we rob ourselves of all enjoyment from life because we feel like we have to earn it, and that was where I was, is I felt like I had to earn my ability to rest, and I had to earn my ability to enjoy life. And if we do that, it's going to lead to overwhelm, because without being able to just sit and enjoy all of these things and have peace and have just something that is special for us, right? That could be a cup of hot tea at the end of the night. That could be starting your day with, a nice cup of coffee prepared just the way you like it. It could be as simple as, reading a book that's just for your own enjoyment. It could be anything, but just giving yourself time to say, this is my time that I get to have that's just for me. That will change your entire perspective. That will, for me, it helps me become more productive in my to-do list and in my tasks. It helps me have a positive outlook to how I want to show up in my relationship, and it helps me not become resentful of the things that I have to do. It helps me be more submissive to Coda, because I can know that by serving him, I am serving our relationship, and I enjoy our relationship. And so that is finding ways to change mindsets, but the only way you can do that is by giving yourself time to rest and enjoy your life. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, I had gotten to a point where I wasn't enjoying my life. Like, I wasn't enjoying being submissive. I wasn't enjoying, serving my family. I wasn't enjoying serving Coda. It felt like drudgery because I wasn't taking the time to let myself exist for myself. And if you're struggling with feeling like you have to justify your own self-worth by what you do for others, I would really challenge you to reframe that thinking, because you do not have to earn approval. You do not have to earn your self-worth. You do not have to earn your ability to enjoy the life that you've built. And anything that tells you otherwise is trying to steal your joy. It's trying to steal the things that are good. And don't let it. Because what I realized is that by doing things for everyone else and not allowing myself to feel that joy and becoming burnt out and just kind of drudging through life, I was stealing the joy not only from myself, but I was stealing joy from my family. Like, no one enjoyed being around me. It was hard. It was hard, and I really had to realize that I was in a cycle of burnout. And so, how do you break burnout? Like, how do you break that cycle of being burnt out? How do you get yourself out of it? And so the first thing you need to do in order to break a cycle of burnout is to take a break. Like, break the cycle by taking a break. And so really, you need to be able to take a break. And ideally, this would happen on a day where you can have someone else come in, whether that is your spouse or a family member, or even if you have to hire a babysitter if you have kids or something, where you can have someone kind of take over the majority of the responsibilities in the home, so that you can kind of take that time away. And for me, that means the ability to sleep in a little bit, to, get takeout or have a prepared meal for dinner so that I don't have to worry about cooking, or, getting paper plates so that I don't have to worry about extensive cleanup. And really just taking some time to completely take a break from the day-to-day. And so I know that that's kind of a hard ask sometimes, especially if you have very little kids, if you have especially if you have babies, because babies tend to need their mommies. So you might not be able to take a total break, but really put a pause on everything that can wait. So if that means like, hey, I'm going to not do laundry today, and I'm not going to, do dishes today, and I'm not going to worry about vacuuming today. I'm just going to sit and I'm going to, take care of my kids and enjoy interacting with them. Or if you don't have kids yet, then I'm going to sit and read and, take some time to just reflect. Just take that time to yourself to be able to relax and reflect and pare down your responsibilities as much as you absolutely can in order to just break that cycle and break those expectations of yourself and just take some time, right? And taking that break leads into the next thing that kind of helps break that cycle of burnout. Focus on the important things. So for myself, when I was in that cycle of burnout, I realized that I was letting myself get to a point where I was prioritizing the wrong things. I was prioritizing having clean dishes and laundry over the health of my relationships and the attitude of my home. And so with that said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting clean dishes, right? And there's nothing wrong with having clean laundry. We need those things. Like, you want to be hygienic, you want to be clean. And I definitely think that there's this like dichotomy on social media, especially like, oh, women with extremely clean homes are neglectful mothers because you can't have a clean home and happy kids, or you can't have a clean home and be attentive to your kids. And then on the flip side, like, oh, if a woman has an extremely messy home, then she's a really good mother and she's an active mother. You can have both. Like, you can have a clean home and be present as a wife and a mom and, have a balance in your life. But you really do need to focus on what is the priority and where do your priorities lie. Because for me, if I have to prioritize whether or not to get the dishes done during the day or spend time relationship building with my daughter during the day, I know that Coda will be happier and proud of me to spend that time relationship building, because dishes can be done by anyone and they can be done at any time. And so typically that's my job and I'm happy to do it, but they can be done later and it's okay. And so just prioritize what are the most important things. And so if we're talking about the holidays, right? Is it important for you, and I'm just going to throw out, hypotheticals here, but is it important for you to volunteer at your kids' school? Or is it important for you to attend your office party? Is it important for you to take family photos? All of these things are great things. All of these things are fun things. None of these things are bad at all. But you need to decide where do your priorities lie so that you can then know what to say yes to and what to say no to based on your ability and time to be able to do those things. But when you are already in burnout, you really do need to prioritize so that you can start to know where to pull back and where to set your priorities, so that after you take a break, you can come back with a fresh perspective and know exactly where your priorities lie, so that you can then have a fresh perspective to know how to arrange your time, effort, resources, and energies to accomplish your priorities, and where to set boundaries. Because really that's where a lot of this comes into play, is that we get overwhelmed because we don't set proper boundaries. And that is probably a whole topic in and of itself, is how to set boundaries within your life. The last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is don't suffer in silence. Don't let yourself be overwhelmed and not say anything. Your head of household wants to help you. He wants to make you happy. He wants you to be able to have joy and to show up, and he wants to see you succeed and see you thrive. And when we are burnt out, when we're overwhelmed, we are not thriving, we are not having joy, we are not happy. At least I'm not. Those are feelings that really impede my ability to be happy and to be joyful. And our heads of household, they really want that for us. They want us to enjoy the life that they're giving us. So when you are overwhelmed and you're not saying anything, you are robbing them of the ability to show up for you and to help you. And they desperately want to help you. They desperately want to be there for you. And so don't suffer in silence. Say something. And because for me, when I am overwhelmed and I don't say anything and I try to just white knuckle through it and just keep going and think like, once we get to this point, then I'll be okay. We never get to that point without me completely behaving inappropriately at some point, right? So when I'm stressed and overwhelmed, that's when disrespectful attitudes rise up. That's when hurtful words are said. That's when, I tend to be tempted to raise my voice and maybe get really irritated and resentful and all of those things that then become issues of correction, right? And so because I would not respect Coda as the head of household if he did not respect himself enough to require me to speak to him kindly, to speak to him in an appropriate manner, and to communicate with him where I'm at and what I need. And so find a way to communicate, especially to your head of household, but really communicate what you need, communicate where you are, and make an action plan to be able to take that break and be able to set those priorities. Because when you are coming off of overwhelm, when you're coming off of burnout, you really need this, you need a support system, and your first and primary support system as a submissive partner in a domestic discipline relationship is your head of household. You really do need to lean on them to set the tone of your home and set the tone of your relationship. And it is not bad to depend on them for that support. That is literally what they want. They want to be that support system for us. And so we need to let them. And the only way to do that is to be honest and communicate and let them know where we are. Anyway, if you want to see the podcast in its video form, as well as get some other bonus content, click the link down in the description box and join our Patreon to do that. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are not already, please consider subscribing, and we will see you on the next one. Bye.